السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. كيفك حاج؟ بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: لا تدخلوا الجنة حتى تؤمنوا ولا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا أولا أدلكم على شيء إذا فعلتموه تحاببتم أفشوا السلام بينكم. You will not enter the paradise until you believe. And you will not truly believe until you love one another. Shall I not inform you of that which you can do for this love to strengthen between one another? And then the messenger says, spread the salams between one another. So when you hear assalamu alaikum, especially from your teacher, and I say I'm your teacher because I'm in front of you teaching you something, I don't necessarily need to be your main teacher, but you should be enthusiastic. I know when I meet with my mashaykh and I sit down in front of them, I'm just honored just to be in front of them. Of course, we're in different levels. I know what our respected elder mashaykh are on. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve them, but we need to have enthusiasm. So when somebody says assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, because I'm saying a dua to you, assalamu alaikum, may the peace be upon you, and the rahmat, and the barakat. And I heard it from the Hajj, and I think there was one or two here. You don't want to make this nice dua to your teacher. Jazakumullah khairan. We continue on inshaAllah wa ta'ala, and inshaAllah we finalize the first principle, al-asl al-awwal. We had begun discussing different types of worship, and we said worship, ibadah, is a comprehensive term. Comprehensive term. Ismun jami' likulli ma yuhibbuhu Allah, to everything that which Allah loves, and Allah wa yardah, and He's pleased with. So that which Allah loves and He's pleased with, from actions of the tongue, actions of the limbs, inwardly and outwardly. اسم جامع لكل ما يحبه الله ويرضاه من الأقوال والأفعال الظاهرة والباطنة. We're mainly focusing here on, at the moment, inwardly acts of worship which are very important. Outwardly acts of worship, we notice them, everybody does them. The prayer, fasting, and so forth. But when it comes to that which we had spoken about, and I believe we had taken and stopped that, we spoke about fear, and we said there are different types of fear. There was 3 types. There's one that falls into partnership with Allah, shirk. And that is fearing other than Allah, or fearing with Allah something, and this fear is that you fear that they are going to harm you or bring about, or you fear them, you fear that they're going to harm you or they can bring about some sort of good. So that's why you fear them. This of course is shirk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who brings all goodness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who tests His slaves with calamities so they can elevate before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And see how we said tests. Allah doesn't harm the slave. It's important the way we phrase our words with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah doesn't harm anybody. I mean His servant. And that's why we notice when Musa alayhi salam rode the ship with Khidr, and Musa alayhi salam took a plank of wood from the ship. At the end of the story, or during the story, towards the end, when now Khidr took the wood out, and Musa was astonished. They just had taken you across on the boat, or the ship, or this vessel that rides on the water. And he said, of course, didn't I tell you not to ask me? Musa says, I forgot. The story went on to at the end, أَمَّا السَّفِينَةُ. He's responding now after he said, هذا خلاص, this is now هذا فراق بيني وبينك. This is now The end between you and I, you've asked 3 questions. I told you not to ask. I've given you a chance. Khidr now is explaining to him with regards to that, the ship. And he said, أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها. فأردت. أنا. As for the boat, it was owned by the masakin, those who are less fortunate, not the poor, they're less fortunate. And I wanted to make a deficiency in it. He said, I want to. Because something that was deemed to be not so pleasant, he attributed it to himself. فَأَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَعِيبَهَا. But then at the end of it, he says, رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. Mercy from Allah. Not mercy from him. And we know Ibrahim alayhi salam, he had mentioned this in a few of the verses that are mentioned in the Quran with regards to when he becomes sick. وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُ يَشْفِينَ. And when I become sick, not when Allah makes me sick. Okay? So sickness, no doubt, everything's from Allah. Somebody may say, but isn't it from Allah? We say everything's from Allah. Huh? Al-Qadr, the decree of Allah. Everything's written. Everything's been written 50,000 years before the heavens and earth that what is happening in Gaza. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fa'alun lima yurid. Allah is the one. No one tells Allah. No one asks and questions Allah. But there's a hikmah behind it. We don't understand the hikmah. The malaika, we were taught, so we can go back to the lesson that the malaika were taught through the creation of Adam. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء. Exactly what's happening now. Oh Allah, you're going to place a people, a creation on earth, and they're going to cause much corruption and bloodshed. Bloodshed was specified. Corruption falls into bloodshed. Shows you that bloodshed is something severe. It's extra. يعني أتجعل فيها ما يفسد فيها. They're going to cause much ويسفك الدماء. And they're going to cause bloodshed. You could say, قال Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون. I know that which you do not know. What's happening now is cleansing. What's happening now is elevation and martyrdom. The hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, 6 specifics for the one who dies in martyrdom. Forgiven as soon as he's afflicted. He will be free from the punishment of the grave. He will be free from the major fright, al-faz' al-akbar, on the day of judgment. He will intercede for 70 of his family members. He will wear a crown of honor and dignity. And there is one more that slipped me. But who's Allah going to choose? Allah needs, this hadith needs to be put into practice. Sah? This hadith needs to be put into practice. It's hard. And words are easily said. Especially us living here in Australia. Walhamdulillah, in comfort. Nasal Allah ta'ala an ya'fu anna. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bestow His security upon us. It's easily said. But we've never lived in a life like them. Never lived in that. فعبادة is worship which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and is pleased with. Statements of the tongue, actions of the limbs, inwardly and outwardly. We're talking about inwardly, and we spoke about fear, and we said the first fear out of the 3 is partnering with Allah, a fear. This is not allowed. No doubt shirk. Number 2, fear that is a sin, and that is, it could be implemented, a cowardly act, somebody going in the path of Allah, attaining to the front line and then turning back. Or turning his back even, well, this could be a sin too. Let's just say somebody coming into your home to try and steal your belongings, and then you run away. You're in charge to protect your family. So this also is deemed, this is frowned upon, and no doubt this is a sin. And then you have the last one, which we said is a normal fear. It's a normal fear and it's a natural fear. You're not sinned upon it. And that's the natural fear that you have in fearing, for example, a lion or somebody in front of you. Yeah, I know I mentioned about protecting now your home. That's one thing. Protecting your home from anybody stealing something from it. That's your home. But let's just say you're on the street and somebody barges you, okay? And he's big. Yeah, you got one of two things. You're going to try and protect yourself, but you know that this guy is very big. So you say, brother, pick on somebody your own size. Yeah? Bit of fright. That fright, you're not sinned for it. That fright, you're not sinned for it. That's a natural fright that you have, and this is normal. And we know that fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a trait of the slaves of Allah. It's a trait. You need to fear Allah. Because if you don't fear Allah, you're going to do sin. You're going to maybe do things that's going to displease Allah. From the traits of Ar-Rahman, they used to supplicate, رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّا عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. Asking specifically dua to be removed from the hellfire. And we know in another verse, they يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ وَيَخَافُونَ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ. They have khashya in Allah, which is going to come, and they fear the day وَيَخَافُونَ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ, and they fear punishment. We mentioned hope. Hope is an inwardly act of worship, and this is a trait of a Muslim. And I believe we mentioned at-tawakkul, reliance. And he وَالدَّلِيلُ التَّوَكُّلِ قوله تعالى وعلى الله فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين وقال تعالى ومن يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه. Reliance, full reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an act of worship, and we need it most in a time that we're living in now. We can only rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can only be reassured with the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can only be patient and rely upon Allah that victory bi'ithnillahi ta'ala is for the believers. We move on to an act of worship which is ar-raghba wal-rahba wal-khushu'. Desire, dread and humility. Raghba is desiring something. Ar-rahba is, as translated here, dread. It's not khawf, it's not fear, nor is it khushu', humility with fear. Ar-rahba is something that, it's more internal, and we'll maybe mention one of the verses here, inshallah ta'ala, and it can maybe bring, but anyhow, for those who know the translation of dread, inshallah, that can be sufficient. But he قال تعالى إنهم كانوا يسارعون في الخيرات ويدعوننا رغبا ورهبا وكانوا لنا خاشعين. All these three traits were in this dalil. Indeed, they used to hasten to do good deeds. We're talking about the righteous. إنهم كانوا يسارعون في الخيرات ويدعوننا, and they would supplicate to us رغبا, desire, ورهبا, with dread. وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ, and they were to us full of humility. The Muslim needs to try to attain these three. We desire that which is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything of goodness, we need it. Musa alayhi salam, when he made that supplication after he helped them women at the well, when he gave them the water for their flock, he made a supplication, oh Allah, I am in dire need, I am in need of, I am poor from everything that is good for me, to the meaning. He didn't make a specific dua to be quenching his thirst or food or security or general. Anything that I'm in need of everything due to my poverty state that I'm in at the moment. And that was everything, Musa alayhi salam. We are in dire need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need to seek this desire only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything you need. And that's why really if we analyze the Sharia and the Quran and the Sunnah, we're constantly emphasized to ask from Allah. Okay? And plead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Al-khushu', there's another trait of, because here وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ, this more specifically here is humility, and they are humble. Okay, they are humble before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here al-khashya wa dalilul khashya, which is translated as khashya, but I'm going to give a little bit more. Okay, قال تعالى فلا تخشوهم واخشوني إن كنتم مؤمنين, and do not have this fear in them, but fear me if you are true believers. Here we notice which we're almost translating fear and fear with khawf and khashya. Khashya is a little bit more deep, especially when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-khashya هي خوف يصيبه تعظيم ومحبة للمخوف منه. Khashya is different. It is, we're comparing the two between khawf now. Khawf we said is fear. Khashya is fear connected to a magnifying and love from that which we have this khashya towards. Okay? And this no doubt is only Allah. We love Allah. We honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We glorify Allah. So when you fear Him, you don't fear Him just as you fear, for example, a wild beast. That you are fear. I'm not going to say I have khashya in the dog, for example. No, you fear khawf. أخاف من هذا الكلب. You know, but khashya, it comes with, there's more feeling involved with that. You have khashya from Allah, and that's why here, and I need to mention this verse before I continue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects this act of worship of the heart of khashya to the ulama. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. Verily those who have this khashya from Allah are the ulama. The more you know Allah, the more you have, so you know Allah, you know Allah's names and attributes, you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hearing, you know Allah is responsive to your dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know that the mightiness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you fear Him now, so when you stay away from something, or you do something because you have this khashya that you may be punished, you're doing this because you honor Allah and you love Allah. That's the difference between khashya and khawf. Okay? So here, al-khashya is a high caliber. It's a high degree. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse, فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ وَخْشَوْنِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. In the battle here, Wallahu alam, came this in the battle of Badr or Uhud. على كل, and do not fear them but fear me, if you are true believers. Okay? يا أيها الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. That's a different verse in Surah Ali Imran. When the people, they said, indeed the enemy have gathered. Indeed they've gathered. فاخشوهم. Fear them. With the فزادهم إيمانا. And this increased them in iman. وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. Sufficient is Allah. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. And what a perfect trustee Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So here, boys, we need to, and I'm speaking to myself, and this is no doubt a major reminder for myself, these acts, we don't want to be just like a normal Muslim that just walks around but empty heart. Does everything empty. Okay? No, we need to try to attain these acts of worship. وقال الشيخ ودليل الإنابة, turning to Allah. Al-inaba is turning to Allah. Al-ruju'u ila Allah, repenting. So we're talking about this act of worship now. This is more than outwardly also. Inwardly, but mainly outwardly. Turning to Allah. In public forgiveness, in istighfar, in dua, and so forth. وَالدَّلِيلُ الْإِنَابَةِ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى وَأَنِيبُوا إِلَى رَبِّكُمْ وَأَسْلِمُوا لَهُ. And return back to Allah. Return back to your Lord and submit yourself to Him. And we said, Al-inaba al-ruju'u ila Allahi fi kulli al-umur wal-iqbalu alayhi bi'ibadatihi wa imtithali awamirihi wa ijtinab nawahihi. Al-inaba is to return back to Allah in all your affairs. And to pretty much come to Allah. Al-iqbal ala Allah. Facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With everything you do, in your acts of worship, in obedience, in by obeying Him, fulfilling the commandments, and refraining from that which Allah has forbade from us. We should be happy when we refrain from an indecent or immoral or a haram sin. We should do this with happiness. This is returning to Allah, and when you return from this, you're automatically connecting to yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a sign of Iman. Yusuf alayhi salam, when he وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ, automatically, she locked the doors, purified herself, Imra'at al-Aziz, she came to him, هَيْتَ لَكَ, come to me, comforting words. He said, ma'adallah, straight away, I seek refuge in Allah. He needed to return back to Allah straight away. Okay, so here, returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and repenting, not only in your acts of worship, but also in your prohibitions. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in a hadith, وَالْهِجْرَةُ مَا هَاجَرَ اللَّهُ وَالْهِجْرَةُ مَا هَاجَرَ مَا نَهَاهُ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. And migration is migrating from that which Allah forbade you from. And of course, we're not talking about the linguistic migration. We know al-hijra in Islam is al-dhihab أو الانتقال من بلد كفر إلى بلد مسلم إلى بلد مسلمة أو أرض مسلمة. Migration is to migrate from a disbelieving land to a believing land. But here, what we had mentioned, a form of hijrah, or practicing this type of hijrah is fleeing from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbade. Also from the acts of worship, al-isti'ana, appealing for aid and assistance, al-isti'ana. We recite this verse that I'm about to mention minimally 17 times a day. قوله تعالى إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. You alone we worship and you alone we seek assistance through. And the messenger states وإذا استعنت فاستعين بالله. هذا في الحديث أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال وإذا استعنت فاستعين بالله. And when you seek assistance and aid and support, then seek it from Allah alone. We need assistance in Allah in everything we do, especially the salah. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Patience as well. Patience is hard. Being patient is difficult. For young boys now, I don't know how we even get upset. Honestly. How we get upset now, I don't know. And most of the time we're upset about food. We're upset because we didn't receive what we wanted to receive. And we don't want something to go our way. Well, let me remind you, and for those who are listening, nothing in the dunya will ever go your way. If you're getting upset and angry at a young age, imagine your parents having to deal with everything around them. They have to take care of you. They have to go to work. They need to maintain the home. They got a wife. The wife has a husband. They got to be patient with one another, raising you guys. Sometimes they can't focus on themselves anymore. And they're focusing on you. But then you're the one who shows more displeasure than them. How does that work? Boys, do you know that deep down your parents become disheartened when the kids are showing displeasure to their parents? They might not tell you. They know you're young. Yeah, he's only young. He's going to get out of it. He'll be all right. No. You need to learn that there are ways to deal with my parents, and I should always show them a happy face. I should always show them a happy face. So here, no doubt, if you're upset, you need to open up to your parents, but you don't take your anger out at them. Okay? So here, appealing aid and assistance, this is no doubt from the greatest acts of worship. Also from the acts of worship, وَدَلِيلُ الْإِسْتِعَاذَةِ قوله تعالى قل أعوذ برب الفلق وقال تعالى قل أعوذ برب الناس. Seeking refuge. Seeking refuge, here it's, what's الاستعاذة? It is أن تطلب الحماية من الله. Seeking aid, but not assistance is something. Assistance in something. You're finding something difficult, you need to استعين بالله. So you want to pray, you need الاستعانة. يا الله إني أسأل أعني أو أستعين بك أن تعينني على الصلاة. For example, that you assist me in the prayer. You're doing an action you need assistance in. Al-isti'adha, something you're in, there's some sort of a difficulty upon you and hardship, and you're seeking protection in Allah. That's al-isti'adha. That's why قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. You're seeking refuge and himaya and closeness and protection in Allah from مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ, from all evil that you've created. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, seeking refuge in the Lord of the people. قُلْ أَعُوذُ, but from what? You're seeking refuge in Allah and himaya and closeness and protection. بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ. From what? مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ. From the evil. مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ. The waswas of the shaitan. The shaitan, he has the attribute, the sifa of al-khannas. The shaitan, we know he's with us, or he attends to your affairs at times. As soon as the adhan goes, he runs. As soon as you recite Quran, he's not present. As soon as you make your dua before you enter the home, if he was going to accompany you, he leaves. He comes and goes. Okay? This is what the shaitan does. So here, seeking refuge, al-himaya, seeking protection and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have another act of worship, وَدَلِيلُ الْإِسْتِغَاثَةِ. Al-istighatha and al-isti'ana are similar. Isti'ana wasta'in. Our isti'ana is seeking aid and assistance. Al-istighatha is seeking, here, deliverance. But it's more like طلب al-inqadh. Al-inqadh is when you're in dire need. Now let's just say you're drowning. Okay, you're drowning. And you can see so you're underwater now, and you can only barely put your hand up. Here now, you're seeking al-istighatha. You would say al-ghawth. You would say you're seeking dire need. Not isti'ana, I don't need help. You need more than help. Okay? And in this one specifically here, no doubt this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال تعالى إذ تستغيثون ربكم فاستجاب لكم. And when you sought this dire need in your Lord, and He responded to you. Now, as we had mentioned, and I need to just make sure that al-isti'ana, seeking aid and assistance, is talab al-awn, seeking help, support. Okay? Al-isti'adha, we said, seeking closeness and usma and himaya, protection. Okay? And then you have seeking al-istighatha, talab al-ghawth. Okay? And this is dire need from that which you're about to be distracted with. Okay? وهو الانقياذ أو الانقياذ نعم الإنقاذ من شدة وهلاك. Okay? Now, okay, with regards to seeking aid and assistance, there are two types. No doubt seeking it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Putting all trust in Allah and authority that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who support you. But are you allowed to seek assistance in the creation? We say yes, if they are capable of doing and assisting you. If they are able to assist you, then you can seek assistance from them. But you are not allowed to ask for assistance from that which is unable to help you. That will fall into, of course, possibly partnering with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are a few more things here, but let's just take this, these few points at that level. If there is anything you want to ask, because there are some evidences and different types of istighatha and so forth, maybe it's not that type of academic study to take it there now. Here, continuing on, وَمِنْ أَنْوَاعِ الْعِبَادَةِ, and from these different types of worship, الذبح تقربا وتعظيما, sacrificing to draw closer and to magnify and honor. ودليل الذبح قول الله تعالى And the evidence to this, قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له. And say, my prayers, verily my prayers, my sacrifices, my life and my death is for Allah, the Lord of the worlds, and I do not partner with Him anything. Sacrificing and this dhabh, which usually we do this on Eid al-Adha, usually for those who are blessed with a child, they do this with the aqiqah. And if somebody has a farha, a happiness, they'll slaughter for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they want to, they'll sacrifice a sheep or a goat or a cow or a camel, or if they want to honor their guests, they'll do a meal for them and so forth. This is all for the sake of Allah. It is not allowed for you to do this for other than the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. من السنة لعن الله من ذبح لغير الله. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam states, Allah has cursed the one who sacrifices for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we said, this is drawing closer to Allah for al-udhiyah al-hadi. If you're having an expiation, for example, on Hajj, or you're doing this sacrifice for Hajj, which is connected with the rituals of Hajj, you have al-aqiqah and so forth. Now, quiz question. Are we allowed to pray in churches? Huh? Yes, we are. Are we allowed to sacrifice in areas where the Christians or the polytheists or the Jews sacrifice? Huh? Okay. Why I mention this? We can pray in their churches because there's a clear differentiation when I pray or when the Jewish person prays, correct? Or when the Christian prays. So if somebody's looking at a distance, there's no place to pray, there's something happening outside, they're forced to pray in a church. Even though you can pray outside on the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet says, وَجُعِلَتْ لِلْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. Verily, the earth has been made for me a masjid, a place of prayer and pure to worship. Pure and purified, meaning you could pray in it. Sah? Now, obviously pray out there, but let's just say you have to pray. You're a person, let's just say, who's a doctor and you have a surgery coming up and there's a little room in there with a couple of little crosses and so forth. You can pray in there. But when it comes to slaughtering or sacrificing, you're not allowed. Because from somebody a distance, if they see me sacrificing in a place where the polytheists sacrifice and there's idols around, what are people going to think? Good boy. So here we need to clearly differentiate, and there's a hadith you should not, that the messenger mentions that no one should sacrifice. Even he was asked, what about if there was a ceremony that used to take place there? He said, no, do not sacrifice there. Because this could revive this ceremony. In general, we need to make sure we differentiate ourselves between the people of the book and those who worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An act of worship, and this, wallahu alam, is the last before we move into al-asl al-thani, the second principle, which is to know the deen of Islam with its evidences. وَدَلِيلُ النَّذْرِ, its vows. قال تعالى أو قوله تعالى يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا. النذر in the Arabic vows, and then I'll translate it. هو إلزام الإنسان نفسه بشيء ما أو طاعة لله غير واجب عليه في أصل الشرع. Another is to obligate an act of worship or something upon you that which the Sharia has not obligated upon you. Example. Wallahi, if Allah blesses me with a child, I'm going to Hajj this year. Wallahi, if I pass my exam, I'm going to give $100 in sadaqah. Wallahi, if I pass my examination, I'm going to Salat al-Isha. It's obligating something upon yourself, that which the Sharia didn't obligate. I know I made it go into the masjid for the one who's able, and no doubt the view is that it's obligatory. But it's obligating something in a certain khalas. If I pass the exam, wallahi, if I pass the exam, I'm fasting 3 consecutive days. That's sunnah, fasting 3 consecutive days, sah? Wallahi, if I'm able to lift this 100 kilo bench press, I'm going to give $50 in the sadaqah box. For example, here, there are some evidences, and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam states with regards to this vow, that which you're obligating upon you, that which was not obligated, إِنَّهُ لَا يَأْتِي بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنَّمَا يُسْتَخْرَجُ بِهِ مِنَ الْبَخِيلِ. Verily, there's no goodness in it. And indeed, what is extracted from this individual is stinginess. What a stingy transaction when I say, if I'm able to lift up this, I'm going to give in charity. Sah? Oh Allah, allow for me to do this and I'll give. Habibi, give. Oh Allah, if you bless me with a child, I will do this. The act of worship is not comparison to the child. The child's either for you or against you. صح؟ المال والبنون زينة الحياة الدنيا يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة. It's a trial. But this act of worship could be the one that gets you over the line. You're saying this sadaqah you give, or this siyam you do, or these extra voluntary actions you do, is compared to something which Allah is going to give you in the dunya. Oh Allah, if you bless me with this job, wallahi, I'll go to Umrah. Habibi, the job or Umrah? The job or Umrah? You want to compare the job or Umrah? Don't compare a worldly action and be given something, vow something that you need or you want, or vow that you're going to do something because of an act. Habibi, Allah will give you everything you want in the dunya. And you don't. So here, إِنَّهُ لَا يَأْتِي بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنَّمَا يُسْتَخْرَجُ بِهِ مِنَ الْبَخِيلِ. Yet, in saying that, if you make a vow, it is obligatory upon you to fulfill the vow. مَنْ نَذَرَ أَنْ يُطِيعَ اللَّهَ فَلْيُطِعْهُ وَمَنْ نَذَرَ أَنْ يَعْصِيَهُ فَلَا يَعْصِيَهُ. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam states, whoever has vowed that he to obey Allah, let him do so. So if somebody did do this, and they didn't know, in its essence, it's disliked. Okay? It's not haram. But extracted from it, it's stinginess. So if somebody says, Ya Allah, wallahi, if I pass this exam, my HSC, I'm going to give 1,000, my Eid money, wallahi, I'm going to give it fi sabilillah. Okay? Yes, it's disliked what he did. And it extracts, it's stingy. Like, give and then ask Allah through that, Ya Allah, verily I gave this for your sake, and wallah, and seek some closeness through this to pass. But let's just say you made that vow, you need to fulfill it. Because it's a ta'ah, it's an obedience. But if you vowed to displease Allah, no, you do not do so. So if somebody says, if this happens, wallahi, I'm going to do something, and it's haram. Here, if you vow to displease Allah, this is not allowed. And as mentioned here, لكن لا ينبغي للإنسان ألا ينظر أو نعم النظر المشروط. Here it's about the insan, let him not make disconnected vow. That's important. I read this. Making a vow, wallah, I'm going to do this. خلاص. But wallah, I'll do this if this. Don't connect it. Okay, do not connect it. But also don't obligate something upon you. What about if you're unable to fulfill it? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the verse that we had mentioned, يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ, they fulfill their vow. وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا, and they fear the day where it is lengthy. This is the end of the first asl, and that is ma'rifatullahi ta'ala, to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ar-Rabb huwa al-ma'bud, He is the one who is worshipped. And we said Allah is worshipped through these different types of acts of worship: al-Islam wal-Iman, al-Du'a, supplication, al-Khawf, al-Raja, hope and longing, al-Tawakkul, reliance and trust, al-Raghba, desire, al-Rahba, dread, humility, al-Khushu', al-Khashya, yani this fear with love and honoring. Al-Inaba, turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We said al-Isti'ana, seeking assistance and aid. Al-Isti'adha, seeking refuge and closeness and support from Allah. Al-Istighatha, die in need. Al-Dhabh, sacrifice. Another vow. Okay, these are some of the acts of worship that are mentioned here, and these are all dedicated towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this could all be summed up: قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And say, verily my prayers, my sacrifices, my life and my death is all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds. No partnering with Him. Inshallah ta'ala, I believe next week is the last Friday of the month. We will continue. And then we have our dear Sheikh, Sheikh Muhammad Dua, which comes on the first Friday of the month. But inshallah ta'ala, next week we'll begin al-aslu thani, ma'rifatu din al-islami bil-adillah. And that is knowing your religion with its evidences. And then we'll go through this inshallah ta'ala, and we'll take a thorough study of some of the verses here, alongside with the beautiful hadith of Hadith Jibreel. Inshallah. Jazakum Allah khairan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.